From the halls of Montezuma, Kansas, that is, to wherever you may be, this is the Sure and Secure Podcast, a ministry of Morningside Community Church, helping you become sure that Christianity is true and that your salvation is secure through Jesus Christ. I'm Pastor Tim Erickson. Thanks for listening today. Recently, I've been listening to a fascinating audiobook about David Koresh and the Branch Davidians. It's simply entitled Koresh, if you want to look it up, by an author named Stephen Talty. That's Talty. If you're not familiar with David Koresh, he was a cult leader in the area around Waco, Texas, back in the 1980s and early 1990s. He and his followers began to heavily arm themselves in preparation for what they thought was the imminent Battle of Armageddon. And their armory soon drew the attention of the ATF, who launched a very poorly planned raid on their compound outside Waco, Texas, which eventually led to a standoff of about a month and a half that tragically ended with nearly 90 people losing their lives between the members of the Branch Davidians and members of the federal government who died in a shootout with these cult members. Now, it's very easy for people to think that the followers of David Koresh were probably just highly ignorant individuals, probably people who just didn't know anything, really had very low intelligence. But that actually was not the case. His followers were people of very normal intelligence, very average intelligence. One of his followers, in fact, was a lawyer who had graduated from Harvard. Now, you might have reservations about the views of that school, like I might, but you have to have a certain level of intelligence to even get into that school. And this man had graduated from Harvard Law and then become a follower of David Koresh. The thing that united his followers was their belief in David Koresh's claim that he was Christ reincarnate. David Koresh claimed to be God in human flesh, God come again to earth to lead his people through the apocalypse. And his followers believed that claim. They believed it with their whole hearts. They believed it so strongly that they were willing to die for this man who they thought was God in the flesh. Now that raises a pretty interesting question. What could have either proven or disproven Koresh's claims? We could broaden that question beyond just the context of this particular cult group. When someone claims to be delivering a message from God himself, what could either prove or disprove that claim? Well, a miracle could do it. And that's what we'll discuss on this episode of the podcast today as we continue to talk through the contents of the book 12 Points That Show Christianity is True by Dr. Norman Geisler. If you haven't caught any of the episodes in this series just yet, this 12 points framework from Dr. Geisler presents a comprehensive argument for the truthfulness of Christianity, beginning with an observation that everyone really has to affirm, and then moving little by little, step by step, logically from one observation to the next, in order to prove the fullness of what Christians claim to be true. In this episode, we have come to point number 5 in the 12 points, which is this: miracles performed in connection with a truth claim confirm the truth of God through a messenger of God. So that's what we'll dig into in a bit more detail in this episode today. But first, let's recap the points that we've already talked about so we can see the logical flow of this framework. Point number one was this: truth about reality is knowable. That observation lays to rest, for example, the common claim that we hear today that something could be true for you, but not true for me. Well, truth is that which corresponds to reality. Truth just accurately describes and reflects reality the way it really is. And since we all live in the same reality, and we can all know things about our shared reality, and it's undeniable that we can know things about our shared reality. Since that's the case, then it simply cannot be accurate that something could be true for you, but not true for me. So, point one, truth about reality is knowable. And one of the truths that we know about reality is this, point number two: opposites cannot both be true. Once we have discovered that something is true, that a certain claim is true, we know that any claim that contradicts it must be false. Truth simply reflects a certain binary nature that we see in reality. In reality, objects either exist or they don't exist. There's this certain binary character to reality, and truthfulness captures that same binary and reflects it accurately. So, if a claim is true, then we know any claim that contradicts it is false. Point number three was this: it is true that the theistic God exists. So, the God whom we know to be almighty and all-wise and all-good, the God who created this universe and who sustains it even still, that God truly does exist. And we can prove that through a variety of different ways by looking at the reality that he created and seeing how it testifies to the reality of its creator. So there truly is a God. That was point number three. Point number four then follows right on the heels of that. Miracles are possible. If there is a God who really exists, then there is a supernatural being who can act in this world and who could perform actions that would be truly supernatural, which is what miracles are. So, since it's true that the theistic God exists, then it's true that miracles are possible. Miracles can happen, and if they have happened, especially in connection with a truth claim about a message from God, then that miracle could confirm the truthfulness of that claim. And that's what we'll talk about more in this episode today. Dr. Geisler points out in the beginning of this chapter that the primary purpose of miracles was to authenticate a message from God. Yes, sometimes miracles alleviated human suffering, for example, and so they brought certain benefits to the people who received the miracles, benefits that showed the mercy and compassion and the love of God and that sort of thing. But that actually was not their primary purpose. Their primary purpose was to show that a messenger of God truly was delivering messages from him. Dr. Geisler writes this: it is reasonable to assume that a personal God who made persons in his image would want to communicate with them. But how would they know it was God speaking? The answer lies in miracles. One thing unique to a supernatural being is supernatural acts. Thus, it would be understandable that God would confirm his message to mankind through supernatural means. Unquote. And that's exactly what miracles were intended to do, to put the divine seal of approval, so to speak, on God's messengers, so that people would know that these messengers truly were delivering messages from God. We see this in the life of Moses, for example. In Exodus chapter 3, Moses had this encounter with the angel of the Lord at the burning bush, and the Lord directed him to go back to Egypt in order to lead the people of Israel out of their slavery. And at one point in this conversation, when we get into Exodus chapter 4, Moses said this: "What if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, 'The Lord did not appear to you'?" Then the Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" "A staff," he replied. The Lord said, "Throw it on the ground." Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake, and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, "Reach out your hand and take it by the tail." So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hand. "This," said the Lord, "is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you." So when Moses asked that question, what if they don't believe me? What if they don't believe I've been sent by you or that I'm delivering a message from you? God gave him the ability to do a miracle in order to validate his claim to be a messenger from God. And in fact, after that, God then described other miracles that Moses would be enabled to perform in order to prove to the children of Israel that he really was a messenger from God. Now, it's really quite interesting that God responded that way to the question of Moses. It's very interesting that God didn't say, "Look, just tell them that you're my messenger and that they are in no position to question my message. They are simply supposed to believe it and accept it. It is, after all, a message from me." No, God responded by giving Moses a way to provide evidence to support the truthfulness of the claim that he was making. In the study and practice of apologetics, different apologists have debated whether or not it's appropriate to use evidence to support the claim that, for example, the Bible is the Word of God. Some apologists, for example, have said, look, the Bible is a message from God. It is not our place to question that message or to ask for evidence so that we could be convinced that it's a message from God. It's a message from God bearing the authority of God. We are simply supposed to submit to it and not to search for any evidence of whether or not it is truly a message from God. Now, the drawback to that approach, however, would be that we would have no way to decide between competing claims about revelations from God. In other words, we would not be able to decide whether the Bible is the Word of God or whether the Quran is the Word of God, for example. Christians claim that the Bible is a revelation from God. Muslims claim that the Quran is a revelation from God. Well, if we were not able to appeal to evidence in order to support the claim that the Bible really is a message from God, how could we decide between those two competing claims? We would simply be at an impasse, and we would just have to take a leap of faith and choose whether we were going to believe one of those claims. We would have no rational way to decide who was really correct, Christians or Muslims. So, for that reason, I think it's very important that we recognize in the Bible, God was willing to give humans evidence in order to support his messengers. He did not balk at this question from Moses. When Moses said, "What if they don't believe me?" the Lord gave him a way to provide evidence, and that method of providing evidence was miraculous power. So God has always intended his miracles to confirm the truthfulness of the claims that his messengers were providing. We see that in the New Testament as well. For example, in his sermon at Pentecost, Peter told the crowd there that Jesus had been accredited by God to you by miracles, wonders, and signs, which God did among you through him. Or we could think about the time when John the Baptist had a momentary lapse of faith, we might say, when he wanted some kind of confirmation that Jesus really was the Messiah. Well, the disciples of John came and witnessed Jesus doing miraculous things like healing diseases and casting out demons. And so Jesus told the disciples of John, "Go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk. Those who have leprosy are cured. The deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is preached to the poor." So Jesus pointed to his miraculous powers as confirming evidence of his claims. Again, just let me point out, Jesus did not respond by saying, "Look, I'm the Son of God, and it's not for you to question that. It is simply for you to believe it." No, he offered evidence that would persuade and reassure John the Baptist that Jesus truly was the Son of God, as he claimed. The Apostle Paul wrote to the believers in Corinth in 2 Corinthians 12:12, reminding them that the true marks of an apostle, signs, wonders, and miracles, were done among you with great perseverance. So Paul pointed to the fact that he was able to perform miracles and pointed to it as confirming evidence of his claim to be a messenger of God. Now, a little further on in this chapter, Dr. Geisler writes about the logical connection between miracles and divine confirmation. And there are a couple of points here that I think are particularly important. For one thing, he notes that since God is all-knowing, he would be aware of any claim that is made by someone who is claiming to speak for him. And since he is all good, he would not perform a miracle or allow a miracle to be performed in order to confirm a claim or a message that did not truly come from him. So if we see or read of a true miracle, then we can know that that is God's confirmation of the claim that was made. Dr. Geisler then goes on to note 5 criteria for miraculous confirmation, and these are important to consider here for just a moment. Number 1, he writes, the events must be truly supernatural. They can't simply be some kind of anomaly in nature or even some kind of psychosomatic cure like we see sometimes in these big healing revivals led by people like Benny Hinn and others. Sometimes at those events, we see adrenaline and wish fulfillment come together to allow people to do things like stand up out of wheelchairs. Well, when researchers have followed up with those people later on, they've found those people, unfortunately, right back in their wheelchairs. And so that's not a truly supernatural event. In order for miraculous confirmation to be found, the event must be truly supernatural. The second criteria is that there must be multiple miracles. Multiple miracles would just provide even further evidence that God really is confirming the truthfulness of this message. Number 3, the miraculous events must be connected with some truth claim in the name of God. If a miraculous event just happened all on its own, apart from any claim about a message from God, then we wouldn't know what the miraculous event is supposed to signify. We wouldn't know what the miracle is supposed to tell us or testify about. It would have to be in connection with a truth claim made in the name of God. Criteria number 4, the miraculous events must be unique. Now, that's a helpful criteria, for example, for helping us distinguish between Judaism and Christianity. Because someone might say, well, look, Judaism claims to be based on miracles and Christianity claims to be based on miracles. So how can I decide between the two? Judaism is based on the writings of Moses and the prophets, and those men performed miracles. So why shouldn't I stick with Judaism and shun Christianity? Well, the thing about Christianity is that it's able to point to a unique miracle like the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Not only that, but Christianity is able to show that it is the fulfillment of many predictions that were made by Moses and the prophets. And so in that way, the miraculous foundation of Christianity is unique and even stronger than that of Judaism that rejects Jesus as the Son of God. Criteria number 5 is that a predictive element is helpful in confirming a divine claim. If a messenger of God makes a prediction, and then some time passes, and then the prediction comes true, well, that shows power over many other moments of time beyond just the moment when the prediction was made. So that would really show a supernatural knowledge and control behind the prediction and its fulfillment. So a predictive element is helpful and important. Well, as I wrap things up for this episode, let's step back for just a moment to the big picture of this 12 points framework and why these observations about miracles are so important and where they are going to lead us. Since we have seen that it's true that God exists, we know that miracles are possible because there is a supernatural being who could perform supernatural acts. We have now also seen that a supernatural act, like a miracle, could confirm the truthfulness of a claim that is made in the name of God. So now we are in a position to ask, are there any religions out there, speaking of a creator God, that have been confirmed through true miracles? With that question in mind, we can now look at the unique details of Christianity in order to show that Christianity is true. We can look at the contents of the New Testament, for example, and see the miracles that are recorded in its pages. We can see how those miracles performed by Christ and his messengers confirm that they truly were messengers from God. So the confirming power of miracles will now serve as a key to help us unlock a powerful proof for the truthfulness of Christianity over and above the claims that are made by other religions. And as we've already seen, if we can prove that Christianity is true in its central claims, then we can know that any religion that contradicts those central claims is false in its central claims, even if it has certain tangential details true about it. Nevertheless, in its central claims, that religion would be false, and thus it ought to be rejected as a false religion if we can show that Christianity is true. Well, that will be the purpose for the next several episodes as we continue through this framework, 12 points that show Christianity is true. I want to thank you for listening to this episode today and for giving me the opportunity to teach you something to the glory of God. If you have been benefiting from the podcast, I hope you'll share it with your friends so that we might be able to pass the blessing along and help more and more people become sure and secure in their faith in Jesus Christ.